Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unclassified, number 21. We are at the midst of a huge moment in history, a turning point, one you will never forget for the rest of your life. And unfortunately, that is because it's so over. Unbelievable levels of over, right? We're going to get into the bond market, the dollars here, tariffs. We're going to touch on Iran and Greenland. We got a whole lot going on. But first and foremost, Preston, how was your week in this beautiful country we call the United States of America?
Yeah, it was fine. So Ben and I'll be texting throughout the week around different issues and what we're going to talk about here. And I can't remember what exactly the context was, but you sent me something along the lines of like WTF out of nowhere. Like, I can't keep up with what's happening because, like, was that a response to something I asked earlier? Are you mad about something that I said? Are you reacting? But no, you were reacting to news that I didn't know had happened in a text. So that's always helpful.
Yeah,
I don't remember which one that one was. I think that was the rolling back of the tariffs.
It was. Yeah, he just randomly decided out of nowhere. The tariffs are done. And speaking of the tariffs being done, we're going to get into the bond market like right now. But as we speak, Trump caved, he capitulated because of the bond market. And now the bond market is back at the line in which he caved. The 10-year is, we could see in the middle of this podcast the end of the tariffs altogether, but we will see. Anyway, so the bond market, folks,
Right.
The bond and the dollar are falling. Let me clarify. The dollar is falling in value, and the euro is rising in value. Bond yields are rising, and now that is good for you as a consumer. It is bad for the U.S. government because when bond yields rise, interest rates go up with them because there's more bonds than there are buyers. Does that make sense? We're not getting into the nitty-gritty of it, but I just felt like I needed to explain that going forward.
Yeah.
But anyways, so bond rates are falling because all of a sudden the world, Japan started it. People started dumping their U.S. treasuries because they were, this tariff regime is insane. They're just like, well, we're going to do less trade with the United States, so we might as well dump them. But even after Trump dumped his bonds, because as he said that bond market was getting steady, so he stopped the tariffs, even after he stopped the tariffs, the bond market continues to fall. And what does this mean for the United States? It means we're in deep trouble because now the United States, we borrow money, right? The whole reason we have this deficit, this debt, we borrow money to fund the government. And this works because the debt doesn't really matter, or used to not matter, as long as our GDP was going up. But now with the bonds, the yield going up, the interest rates go up, which means that it is prohibitively expensive, not only for us to refinance our debt, but also to pay off our debt going forward and to borrow money. So we're entering into a debt crisis. And on top of that, since the dollar is cratering in value, we're also entering into a currency crisis. This divergence is typically seen in like third world nations and emerging markets where the currency is decreasing in value while interest rates are going up. It is the nightmare scenario.
Not good? Is that what you're...
Yeah, it's very bad. Very, very bad. This dichotomy is what led to the ouster of Liz Truss, who, if you recall, was the UK's prime minister for, was it 30 days? Was it 60 days? Something like that.
I think it was less than that, yeah.
Yeah, it was shorter than a head of lettuce, right? This led to her ouster, and so some people say it'll be the ouster of Trump. With the way this is going, the bond market, according to people like Matt Iglesias, they're saying that it is happening not just because of the tariffs, but is now an entire reaction to Trump altogether, where people believe the United States is now no longer a stable nation and is no longer a democratic nation, that we've become more or less a banana republic in a sense. And so that is why people keep dumping even after he drew back the tariffs. And so what this also means is that the U.S. dollar will no longer be the reserve currency if this keeps continuing. And we have Deutsche Bank here saying the market is reassessing the structural attractiveness of the dollar as the world's global reserve currency, and it is undergoing a process of rapid de-dollarization, which is what we're seeing. The whole reason our debt is the way it is is because of tax cuts, but we were able to go to that kind of debt level because of those tax cuts, because countries were buying tons of bonds from us, and that is who kind of owns the debt, right? If now all of a sudden that's not happening, other countries are not going to subsidize our way of living as they have been, and we will have to raise taxes dramatically, and the United States is going to undergo a really deep economic crisis, stagflation, all of it. And on top of that, the House just passed a budget bill that will add $7 trillion to the debt over 4 years. And to add to the Matt Iglesias claim about the Banana Republic thing, JP Morgan has now started redacting their investor calls, where they are redacting what they're saying, the risk to the United States posed by the administration, where they're just blacking out words altogether. And so if you're not on the call, you can't see it. Mainly because one of the advisors there said, people always come at you for anything you say, but typically you don't have to worry about the government coming after you. But he says at this point, you really do. And that kind of sums up the investor institutional fear here. So I kind of gave us the whole rundown there. I perhaps was not doing it full justice. But
you were not. And the reason I know you were not is because I'm looking at the notes here, Ben. You left some key portions out, man.
I did, yes.
Yeah. Quote, we are so fucked.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I decided to just let Ben go. Like, clearly that's a whole bullet right there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the part that's perhaps most terrifying is that we are heading towards destruction. Any other country would have gotten rid of their leader. Like, Liz Truss was ousted. We've seen other leaders ousted because of their bond market. They're just riding with Trump here. The market doesn't have faith in him. The bond market doesn't. The world doesn't. He has to go. The country... What did I text you earlier this week? Unrelated to this, but it was a Henry Kissinger quote, and it was, the individual seeks salvation in the afterlife, but the state is immortal. With the way we're heading with this bond market, it can't... The cult of personality needs to break, and he has to go. And we can try it with J.D. Vance, and maybe we get a fresh start, and people go, all right, well, everything's back to normal with America. But the rate we're going, we're doing irreversible damage to ourselves. And on top of that, he's trying to fire Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. The U.S. as rich as it is because of stability, because of our independent monetary policy, because of the belief that everything in America happens between the 40-yard lines. And if all of a sudden he can just start firing Jerome Powell, he's going to put Jesse Waters in charge of the Federal Reserve, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble. Especially if the president control what the interest rates are. What are we doing? Of course, the whole reason Congress protected the Federal Reserve, the whole reason the president can't fire them, is because it doesn't really work out well if the president can lower the interest rates. Because then you just have constant inflation, right? Because no one wants higher interest rates. Because it causes it's not necessarily good for economic growth. And so, they're going through the Supreme Court to try to do this, but we are in for some deep, deep trouble. And the way out is by congressional Republicans. They have to get rid of this dude. And maybe they're going to ride it till the wheels come off, but it seems as though U.S. global hegemony is way weaker than I think anyone ever thought.
Yeah, I always try to think of, this is not an area I spend a lot of time studying. I tend to try to view a lot of this more with just break it down simply, because a lot of times I feel like it doesn't make sense. And a couple things where I'm struggling with right now is, first off, you're talking about a new bill coming in. So one of the arguments here is we're in so much debt. But I have a hard time understanding these, why we have to go through these amputations and fancy, complex structuring of everything and tariffs, but then we're going to continue spending. Like, if you just break that down to an individual's budget, if I'm spending 6x more than I'm making, but I say, don't worry about it, I'm going to refinance my car loan, you're going to say, that's not the problem, man. You have to get that spending under control. And it feels like until we actually do that, all the rest of the stuff here isn't really serious. I have a hard time coming to grips with that. The other thing here is, again, just trying to, the personal side to show how it doesn't make sense to me. The up, down, sideways, back and forth with tariffs has just caused everyone to stop. Like at some point we'll see the economic activity reports over this period of time, and it has to just be frozen. Like, so we are considering doing some renovations in our home, and we had the guy come out. They gave us some quotes like a week ago. This week we were set to meet with him to go over, like, to finalize the plans, and we're not doing that. We stopped. It's not a massive expenditure, but like, there's construction equipment, construction materials involved here. I don't want to be in the middle of a project and find out that some of the stuff we're buying just got hit with a 200% tariff between the time the quote was made and the time they install it in 6 weeks. So, like, because I have no idea. I don't know where these materials, all of the materials, are coming from. So it's not an emergency by any stretch. So we just said, you know what? This seems like not the right time to get into that. Let's just wait. Now, hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point. I like the guy. Seems like a solid business. Looking forward to working with him. But if I'm thinking that, what are big businesses thinking in terms of investment in certain areas, or even making purchase orders? Like, if you genuinely don't know what the cost of that product is going to be next week, you can't function. And that's where I start to lose an understanding of, like, what are we doing here? Like, I feel like a lot of this could have played out over the course of 6, 9, 12 months, and say, this tariff is going to go into effect January 1st, 2026. But this immediate stuff seems to me like, and maybe I'll have to eat my words, and we'll come back in 6 months and say, my God, this was genius. Look at what came out of it. But right now it looks like we're causing some unnecessary damage to the global economy. And I'm not entirely sure what we're getting out of it quite yet.
Well, I mean, you're right. On your statement about the debt, you're right. There's a theory an economist laid out called two drunk Santa Clauses, right? And
I like where this is going.
Yeah, and it's about how essentially both parties raise the debt drastically, but the difference is that one's honest about it, the other one's not, and so it's called the two drunk Santas theory. So on the debt there, but on the tariffs, I agree with you. I mean, we've all seen the jokes of people saying, "Oh, well, now that the tariffs are paused, I've paused my building of my factory in Ohio," right? So it's the uncertainty of the tariffs is just making things worse, and you either go with it or you don't. But even with the pause on the tariffs, the average tariff rate is still higher. It's higher than it was when we were tariffing the entire world at different percentages. Right now we have 145% tariff on what? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say part of what I struggle with here is it's not even the numbers. It's that the numbers go on and come off at the whim. So, like, President Trump wakes up and says, "Today I don't like tariffs," and he pulls them back, and like the stock market rebounds a little bit because they're like, "Oh, wow, okay, this might be the right direction." But that business in Ohio still can't make any plans because, my God, it changed at the blink of an eye. Like, you cannot function when there's no process involved here. And it's just, I woke up today and decided we're going to put them back on. We're going to get into China's tariffs here in a second, but those have changed 3 times in 3 days.
Yeah,
that's a real dollar amount. It's a real impact to how people are going to do business. And you can argue in favor of these. I'm not even arguing that they're good or bad net. It's the rapidness in which they're changing makes it almost impossible to function, it seems. But yeah.
I agree. I think you're without a doubt correct. And the part I was going to say about the tariffs is that I've completely blanked on what I was going to say about the tariffs. But you're right.
I was worried about the tariffs, so I bought 10 pounds of coffee this week just to be careful. Priorities.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But the interesting thing about the tariffs is that it seems as though, like you said, there is no rhyme or reason. He chooses it arbitrarily. It's just a bonehead economic policy. Even, like, the market may have rallied, like, to historic levels, but, you know, it was doing so because the president had finally abandoned it. And then all of a sudden the market closes and everyone comes back to reality, right? Everyone goes, oh, okay, so we still have a huge tariff on everyone and nothing's really coming out of it. It's absurd. But let's get into this trade war. Well, first, we'll get into the tariff crisis here. We have the tariffs. We placed it on every country in the world. Everyone had a different rate. We talked about this last week. But this time he comes in on Wednesday. I mean, we didn't even get 3 hours into the day. And he goes, actually, the tariffs are paused. Everyone has 10% now, except Canada and Mexico, who have 25%, and China, who has a 100% or 125% tariff. And that, like I said, the market went crazy. But it just wasn't, people were like, reality kicked in. Because then the next day, Trump raises the tariff on China to 145%. And China responds today with a 125% tariff. That's an embargo. That is an effective embargo. There's no way around it. And you could say he's going to get China to come to the table. I wouldn't be so sure because last night, the United States, using one of the private back channels to Beijing, which, side note on the back channels to Beijing, there was a story in the South China Post, which I know is like a propaganda thing, but like it's helpful, I guess, for understanding them to a certain extent. But they said that they have 10 private channels. The Chinese administration has 10 private channels with the U.S. government, and all the private channels are telling them different things, which you could say is propaganda. But with this administration, I've seen it firsthand.
Right,
that's definitely happening. And basically, they send through the back channels. They say, look, Xi needs to publicly request for a call with Trump, and then don't escalate, don't raise your tariff rates, and we will resolve it, right? We're going to de-escalate. And China said, LOL, and not only did they not request a call, they said they don't want a call, and then they increased their tariff rate from 84% to 125%. And so we are off to the races here in this trade war, and we are in trouble. I mean, the way Ian Bremmer put it is, a global trade war between two men in their 70s, convinced they're right about everything, surrounded by advisors scared to contradict them, makes things a little harder to resolve. That kind of puts the nail on the head, doesn't it? So, God, I know that the Trump administration is trying to frame this tariff debacle as like, oh, we just did it because no one retaliated, which I would like to mention. I don't know if I sent you the video, but to our viewers here, they kept saying after he delayed the tariffs that there was no one retaliated except China. That's not true. Both Canada and the EU retaliated against the United States on Wednesday, the day the tariffs were paused and they went into effect. Apparently, they did not tell Trump this because he kept saying, only China retaliated. And then they cut to the Oval and a reporter goes, well, the EU and Canada did retaliate. So how come you keep saying they didn't? And Trump looks to Bessonnet and he looks to Lutnick and he says, they retaliated? And they're like stuttering over themselves. They're like, but it was different. It was delayed. They were like, we're going to do it later, but we will retaliate. And Trump was like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad they didn't. And I was like, they did. They quite literally did. And so they've postponed their tariffs, but that kind of gives a framing that the president's not getting good information, the fact that they withheld that from him. But after the fact here, they're trying to frame it as, oh, we were just isolating China. And I don't think the United States needs to pretend, it's not 1940, it's not 1950. We don't need to pretend, oh, we're tariffing everyone just so we can tariff China. We can just say, yeah, we're tariffing China. And Trump did that in 2018. I don't know why they're pretending the strategy needs to be that way. But anyways, they're like, oh, we're going to come against China as with allies and all that stuff. We're going to isolate them. Not working because the EU and China are entering trade talks. They're removing tariffs on each other. EU leaders are going to Beijing. Spain signed a memorandum to seek closer ties to Beijing. The president or the prime minister or whatever he is was there in Beijing today with Xi. They're not isolating China. They're making China stronger. And everyone's crowding this thing. There was a cartoon in the New Yorker. I'm all fired up today. I apologize.
I know. I'm letting it ride, man. I like it.
Yeah.
No.
There was a cartoon in the New Yorker. Two of them. The first one was a graph of the stock market where it goes down like this and like all the way hits rock bottom and then pops back up with a circle around the bottom. And it says, and it was at this very moment the president decided his plan all along was to reverse his policy, right? And then another one is a king shooting bow and arrows at a wall, and a scribe painting a bullseye around where the arrows land. And that kind of, I think, summarizes the messaging around this. And that terrible, awful press secretary, I can't stand her. She acts like she's the sorority president of the United States. Don't get me started, okay? She is over here screeching at people, yelling, it's art of the deal. What do you mean it's art of the deal? The president just told us he delayed the tariffs because he got spooked by the bond market. And you're over here yelling at us it's art of the deal. Screaming. I mean, get a grip. Get a grip.
I hate something that's frustrating to me, and we've seen it at various times in different administrations, but it's definitely on hyper focus right now, is when other people are forced to explain the rationale behind policy decisions. And like, well, here's what I'm thinking the reason is. And I hate that because to your point, like, look, if the goal here is to cut off China, maybe wreck the Chinese economy. I've heard that as an argument. Like, lay that out. You'd probably have a lot of people on board. I would at least like to know, like, the direction we're moving in. Why are we doing this thing? And there's already been a lot of pushback when they were talking about, the tariffs are going to be painful for Americans. And there were people on both sides of the aisle saying, but why? Like, what is the thing? Like, we can endure some suffering and some challenges, but like, what is the thing we're working towards? Right? Like, you go to the gym to work out to get stronger, and it might suck while you're in the gym, but like, you know what the thing is going to be on the other end. It's never been clear like what the thing is on the other end. Like, for a little while it was less fentanyl, which is like, oh, okay, yeah, seems like a positive. And then it was trade imbalances and dairy tariffs against the United States and like currency manipulation. And like, we just don't, it's like, what, I don't know what the thing is anymore. If we had a coherent, like, clear cut, we're going after China for this, that, and the other reason, like, I think you'd get more people on board, or at least more understanding. I get really frustrated when there's not a clear message. The messages are different between different people. And it's not just, we're talking about tariffs, but this has been the same with the foreign policy stuff as well. Depending who you talk to on what day, it's a different policy. And we're forced to like kind of try to read between the lines. And like, I hate that.
Oh, I fully agree with you. It's like Schrodinger's tariff, but like on a massive scale. The tariffs are for everything, Preston. Like you said, fentanyl, we're going to bring manufacturing back. We're going to pay off the national debt. We're going to, revive masculinity, but also they're for negotiations and trade. The only comparison I have to the reaction to the ever-shifting rationale for the tariffs is, and I don't want to be cliche here, but I do believe this, it is like 1984 when the people are chanting, we've always been at war with Oceania, after they were just at war with a different country and were allies of Oceania the week prior. It's just like, the tariffs to bring manufacturing back. And then 2 days later, it's, just as we drew it up. You're so good at this, Mr. President. I mean, get a grip. But the other part of the tariffs is that no one's buying this thing because he threatened last night another tariff on Mexico unless they deliver water from the Rio Grande to the United States, unless they help facilitate it. This is just going to be 4 years of shakedown. No one's caving in on this, and everyone's going to look to decouple from us. This is crazy, okay? The fact that he keeps raising the tariffs for arbitrary, random reasons is nuts. And that is why everyone's fleeing us. There's no coming back from this. And I've seen people say, look, the upside of this is that after this is all over, in 4 years, 2 years, hopefully a week, hopefully they just get in there and they go, he's gone. People are going to be very institutional pilled. They're going to say, we need strong institutions, stronger than ever before. And that may be true. But I'm going to tell you this. As someone who's read a lot of stuff about Eastern Europe, about Russia, about dictatorships, sometimes you don't get out. You don't get out. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And you see that for Argentina. It just gets worse. And sometimes you don't get out. So the United States needs to act proactively. We need to shut down this tariff regime and restore sanity to the nation. And on the China-U.S. trade war, I think this is important to say. People, I think, have done a good job of noting this. China can stay poor longer than the United States can. And I think that's probably quite true. And I think it also helps. And what I mean by that is, like, China can endure greater hardship than the United States can. I don't think Americans can endure. Am I saying that? Endure the hardship that the Chinese have undergone in their very lifetime. That's not to say the Chinese are some immortal people and that we're weak cowards. But I think, like, you get my point. I mean, we couldn't even get people to stay inside for a week during COVID. And I think that's going to be a major
China welded their doors shut, yeah.
I know, they welded their doors shut. And we had people breaking quarantine. Everyone's just like, stay inside for 2 weeks, and we couldn't even do that. So
needed toilet paper, man, yeah.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, like, especially when we get into this war of what society can endure the most. Xi has a limitless ability to suppress his own people without consequences. Trump's peoples have guns. So, like, I don't know, we're going to try to get into a pissing match over this, right? That's not like a call to violence or anything, to clarify, but I'm pointing out the obvious issue there, that the difference here between the U.S. and China and how Trump does not have the ability to last as long as Xi. Anyways, what else do we have to say about tariffs or bonds? Or should we move to a war?
I want to be careful going down the rabbit hole of who would win a trade war, because I don't know that anybody necessarily wins that. A lot of times that ends up in some kind of actual war, because
I think it will.
Countries get real upset about this kind of stuff, understandably so. But there's so many directions that it could go that I think it's very hard to say they can just take more than us. They can take. They could shut down Taiwan, right? There's a lot of different directions. They could nationalize American companies that are operating in China. Like, there's a million steps that can be taken to make this increasingly more painful for the United States, and vice versa. There's a lot of steps we can take to make it more painful for them. So I think it's really hard to say definitively that they would outlast us or we would outlast them, just because we don't know how it ratchets up. I don't know if this is necessarily a good example, but in college we would take boxing, and look, man, I want to get to my next class, not concussed.
Yeah.
And just, let's get through this. Ben and Preston are teamed up for the day, and you're kind of sparring to warm up, and there's like this unspoken agreement that, like, we have to do this. I'm not going to hit you as hard as I can. But inevitably, like, every other week or something, you would accidentally land a punch a little harder than you planned, and it would piss off the other guy. And next thing you know, you're in an all-out fight, going to the next class all bloodied up and your face swollen. And it's like, I don't even know what just happened. I thought that this was just like a normal, and I feel like that's the kind of place that this tariff trade war could go with China, where it's like a little bit of a tariff on each other. Okay, we gotcha. I see what you're doing. We got to do this. And you kind of blink, and all of a sudden it's like, this is out of control and we can't rein it back in.
Oh, I fully agree with you. I mean, everyone, this is like the plot. I know this is the plot to Star Wars Episode 1, trade wars, embargoes, and tariffs, just to point that out. But, like, you're right, it does result in war. Pearl Harbor is a result of, I should mention, we were entirely justified in embargoing Japan, putting an oil embargo on them, but that is what brings about Pearl Harbor, right, is the embargo on Japan over the oil. And these things do result in real wars. And you're right, the more we decouple, the less costly it is for China to make a move on Taiwan, or to do something to Japan, or to any of our other allies. We are crossing the Rubicon, and we cannot be less prepared. Our leadership is not prepared for this. So maybe Mr. Deals will pull something out of his ass. Probably not, but we will see. Because China they keep escalating. They seem like they are determined to prove a point here. They seem like they are willing to try to tame Trump and either prove that they are the hegemon the United States no longer is, or to prove that Mr. Trump can be tamed like a dog. I don't know.
Just to take it back, it feels like I still don't fully understand why we're entering into a trade war. I think that's where I get stuck, because I feel like I hear all these different. It's like we're amputating the leg. We break your leg, and it's like the first idea is let's amputate it. It's like, well, hold on. Is there anything else we can try? Have we tried everything else? Mm-hmm. Could we try something else? It feels like we're jumping to an extreme very quick, and there's times throughout history where that's necessary. I still don't get right now why that's needed today. And that's where I'm stuck.
Well, I fully 120% agree with you. Trump's view of the world is very mercantilist. There are, I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, the endless screen grabs of Gary Cohen recollections of his conversations with Trump at all. Gary Cohen was, was he the economic advisor? Commerce? He was something. But, you know, his time with Trump's very well documented. There was a time where we were signing a free trade agreement with South Korea, or a trade agreement, and he took the papers off Trump's desk, so he couldn't read what it was, so he had to sign it. And obviously people are upset about that. How could you do that? But his argument is, no, he was going to look at it, and then he was going to rip up the agreement saying we need more. So he's like, I just took it away from him, told him he needed to sign it. He wasn't allowed to see what was in it. But Gary Cohen's whole thing was that he was fighting Trump's mercantilist view of the world, where he would say, look, no one wants to work these blue-collar jobs. We did these job surveys. Everyone who's working in these coal mines and these factories in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, they would rather work a 9-to-5 white-collar job. And Trump would just say, I don't believe it. That doesn't make any sense to me. What do you mean it doesn't make any sense to you? What do you do? What have you done your entire life? You've been a real estate guy who's declared bankruptcy 8 times. What do you know? Like, you don't want to work in the factories. Why do you think everyone else does? So that is like the whole point. Is he has a mercantilist view, and unless that view is not going away. He's had it for his entire life. So that is why we have a trade war. He believes that countries acquire power through wealth and through the capitulation of others. And if anything, maybe that was true up until 1945, but it's not anymore, because we broke the cycle. We became the voluntary empire. That's wrong to say, because we're not an empire, but you know what I'm saying. Everyone joins us because they want to be friends. Not anymore. Hopefully the West still exists when this is over, but
we do still have one close friend, Israel. They're pretty happy with what we've been doing recently, for the most part.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
and they're kind of leaning on us right now, it looks like, to get after Iran. Should we jump into some of that stuff?
Yeah, let's get into Iran. So I have some questions for you. Why? No, not like why. I'm glad we're getting to Iran, but like,
first
why?
off, how dare you? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Why are we doing this? Why? I understand. Like, why do we need a nuclear agreement now? He left it in his first term. He said it was awful. And Iran doesn't seem like they're interested in a nuclear agreement. Why now? Why the pressure to get into one currently? And like, why are we willing to risk a war for supposedly preparing for war with China, trying to insulate them, but now we have 1/4 of our real military power surrounding Iran, saying that we're ready for anything, we'll take military action? What's happening here?
Yeah, so don't view this as a nuclear agreement. This is nuclear dismantlement. By all accounts, is what Trump is pushing towards. Netanyahu the other day referred to it as a Libya-style approach, which I don't know. Like, look, Netanyahu's a smart dude, so I think he probably knows what he's doing. That's trolling of Khamenei right there, because Gaddafi. The famous story here is that Libya gave up their nuclear weapons, gave up their nuclear program, and then Gaddafi was still toppled and killed. So it's kind of like the example of why you don't give up nuclear weapons or don't give up nuclear programs, if you're a dictator, because then you lose the power to stay in power, if you will. So. That's what they're talking about, complete dismantlement of the program. And Netanyahu said, following his meeting with Trump this week, it can either be a U.S. or Israeli-led dismantlement program, but there's not going to be any monitoring. They're not playing that game anymore. So, again, when you hear nuclear agreement, it's not the JCPOA or whatever that was, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It's not the Iran nuclear deal that Biden or that Obama put into place. This is layers beyond that. In terms of why, again, something that I don't know has been well articulated, but arguments that I have heard is that this is viewed as a short-term issue, something that can be dealt with relatively quickly, compared with some of the larger threats like China. So if we commit to this, which is Trump supposedly gave a 60-day deadline, I'm hearing towards the end of May is the time period where we're either going to have a new agreement in place or military action could be realistic. Deal with Iran, and then we can refocus on China. Roll the dice there. Famously, in World War I, Germany decided to deal with France pretty quickly so they could turn over to Russia. That didn't exactly pan out as planned. 4 years and millions of deaths later, can't always just quickly deal with an adversary. But that's what I've heard the argument for Iran right now.
I disagree. I mean, we've had a lot of very successful quick interventions. We went in Afghanistan, and we were only there for like 6 months, and then we overthrew Saddam, and that was over within a year.
Yeah.
So come on. We're just gonna bomb once, and it's gonna stop, and nothing's gonna happen. Come on.
Well, part of the challenge here too is, like, we've drawn this hard line with Iran's nuclear program, and I agree that a nuclear Iran would be a problem. And they kind of showed why this week when there's reports that they've been sending more advanced long-range weapons to their proxies, especially in Iraq, which should not be much of a shock. That is the Iranian system. This proxy network that they built, the axis of resistance, is their strength. I hate it. I don't like it. But it's been effective. And we've seen them give very advanced weaponry, borderline top-of-the-line stuff to the Houthis and to Hezbollah. So it's not crazy that they would distribute this stuff to some of the other militias. So if you expand this out a little bit, the argument right now, the reason that they're doing that is because if the United States goes to strike these nuclear facilities or missile production facilities, we probably don't know where every long-range missile is stored in various warehouses across Iraq, and all of a sudden those start flying at different locations in the Middle East. U.S. locations, Israeli locations, friendly locations, whatever it might be. It's not crazy to then expand that out to nuclear weapons and say, okay, Iran gets nuclear weapons, what would it take for them to then provide small ones, maybe, or even dirty bombs of sorts, to these militias as well, to provide that same degree of protection against being overthrown. And that's the major concern with Iran. And again, I think they're validating that point right now. So we'll see. We've got a lot of assets there right now, man. It looks like the second carrier strike group is going to be there any day now. There was some speculation that yesterday the Carl Vinson showed up. Multiple air defense batteries, additional air defense batteries, B-2 bombers, F-35s, tons of transport aircraft. There's a real cost to that, whether it's used or just a negotiating tactic. So I think it shows how serious we are about doing something there, because we could make a lot of threats without moving resources, and we could make a lot of threats and still strike Iran without having to move a lot of resources. Moving all of these into position comes at a real cost. So it looks like I think Trump's trying to wrap this thing up in the next 60 or 90 days, one way or the other.
I feel like I've heard that a lot, though. He's always trying to wrap things up here pretty quickly. The ceasefire in Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. I mean,
I'm not saying that it's going to be
though?
wrapped up. I'm not saying it's going to be wrapped up. I just think a lot of the concern right now is that Iran drags out these talks. Israel, the United States, and a couple other countries have talked about that, how the concern is that Iran's just going to drag their feet. It's one of the reasons that Trump is pushing for one-on-ones with Iran right now. He doesn't want to go through an intermediary because he says that's just going to make it take longer. And it's silly. We're going to be in the same hotel having somebody go back and forth between the third and fourth floors. Now, whether or not that actually results in a solution here is maybe a different story. But my gut says sometime in the next 60 to 90 days, there's either going to be a new agreement reached about the dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program, or we're going to see bombs falling on Tehran.
What did you see the statement that the advisor to Khamenei said, or Khamenei? Who is Khamenei? Is Khamenei the guy who was before Khamenei? Oh, you're right. Okay. So Khamenei, did you see what his advisor said about Americans?
Depends which.
He said
thing?
they were. Let me find the exact comment here because I privated it and I was like, "Oh, jeez." He was ripping into the American delegation. He was very upset with their conduct. Why can I not find this?
What delegation though? There haven't been any talks. Supposedly tomorrow is when these talks begin.
It was something to do with the Americans they were dealing with at some point.
Okay.
But basically, he was complaining that they were ignorant, they were rude, they were cowardly, and he may have called them fat and stupid. I'm not sure. But he was complaining that they keep coming up and saying, let's negotiate. Cut the crap. Let's negotiate. Let's do this. And let's have direct talks. And they're using trickery to get us to talk to them directly. And I don't know. I don't have anything to say about that. But I thought that was an interesting complaint.
Speaking of the delegation, something that I don't like here is Steve Witkoff is in charge of this one.
Hey, I have a question for you. Is he the Secretary of State and Marco's the deputy? Why does Steve Witkoff get sent everywhere? And I tell you, if you listen to the interview of Tucker Carlson, he's over here talking about, President Putin. He went to go pray for President Trump, not because he was the leader, but because he was friend. He made a friend there. I hope a Nigerian prince never emails Steve Witkoff because he's going to lose his whole fortune. Go on.
So capabilities aside, these are too many high-level issues, complex issues for one person to be leading the charge on. I don't like. We got to have somebody else. We're talking about right now. Witkoff is the man in charge of bringing about a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, which that did not work, but still he's in charge of that, getting there at some point. He's the one in charge of bringing about an end to the largest land war in Europe since World War II. That by itself is a pretty significant ask, and now he's going to be in charge of negotiating the Iranian, whatever it might be, nuclear dismantlement. By itself, a pretty big deal. I don't like seeing the same person in charge of that many different things. Especially because the only thing we really have to go off of at this point is the progress with Gaza and the progress in Ukraine, and neither one of those are give me reason to be optimistic. So again, taking his capabilities, the dude might be the smartest guy in DC right now and the ultimate negotiator. These three things are not what one person should be tackling. We've got a lot of smart people in the United States that we could send to kind of run the show on any one of these. It makes me think that Trump wants to get it done, but I'm not sure we're putting the resources in that sense behind it. We're putting the military resources behind it, no doubt. I'm not sure the diplomatic ones are there right now.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. They are. Yeah, so let me get this straight. So they're negotiating a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. They're negotiating a ceasefire over Gaza. They're negotiating the Iran nuclear deal. And on top of that, they're negotiating trade deals with 75 different countries. And they're going to wrap it all up within 90 days. I mean, I think you're right, dude. I think a whole lot of nothing's getting done here.
I just, even down at like a company level, you have a projects officer, if you will, right? And that's like their thing. They focus on that one thing. They're the main point of contact. And when you start expanding that out, this projects officer is the lead for 2 projects, 3 projects, 6 projects. It dilutes their time. Like, again, Witkoff could be spending 18 hours a day on any one of these issues easily. You just start layering them on, and it just starts taking away time that he can spend. Like, now it's less time to try to figure out how to bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. There's only so much time in the day. And I don't care that he's the top point man and he's got teams working on it. Like, we all have limited time and resources, limited brain power available. And I feel like each one of these issues, if we're serious about it, deserves somebody's full commitment.
Does Steve Witkoff have a team though? Or is it just
I would imagine he does. I don't know. I would imagine I'm going to be not happy if we find out at the end of the day that it's one dude just making some notes in a notebook trying to run all this by himself. That would be embarrassing. So hopefully there's a team around him.
Inshallah. We will see. So my question for you though, if they do prepare a strike on Iran, how's the outcome to this? Do you think it resolves? Do you think they strike and it's over and maybe Iran retaliates? I know that I believe both the generals during Trump, or the Joint Chiefs of Staff during Trump's tenure, they recognized Iran's right to retaliation, which is, after we killed Soleimani, then they bombed whatever the airbase was in Iraq. Do you think Iran retaliates? Do you think this Trump administration recognizes the right to retaliate? Or do you think they're going to do something ridiculous and bomb Iran and then say, don't retaliate, and then escalate further?
Recognizing the right to retaliate is an interesting way to phrase that. It doesn't really matter if we recognize it or not. Like,
right.
They may or may not, right? I think, again, to talk about going back to the China tariff trade war thing, there's all these different levels where it could go. And I think all things considered, Iran was relatively restrained following the death of Soleimani for how much power that man exerted over the Middle East, what he put into place. The fact that we just caught a couple missiles to Al-Assad Air Base, and I don't believe any Americans were killed. There were some minor injuries, but the fact that that was the fallout is, like, we came out on top in that one. Whether or not Iran could have done more is maybe a different conversation, but I think a lot depends how we go about doing it. Is it limited strikes inside of Iran, or is it trying to completely dismantle their nuclear program from the air? Because that's not going to be easy. I'm not even sure we can do that. One of the challenges we run into is a lot of the Iranian capabilities are going to be underground, deep underground. So even if we hit these things with, bunker buster after bunker buster after bunker buster, you can't be certain from a distance that we've actually eliminated that program. And one of the issues with Iran right now is we're seeing leadership inside of their country say, hey, the more the United States talks about striking us, the stronger the argument comes for developing a nuclear weapon. And I understand that. So it's a little bit of, if we don't completely do away with all of this in phase one, are they more likely to push forward with the development of a weapon? Probably. It doesn't seem like a problem that we can resolve with a couple of B-2 strikes. It seems like a regime issue. So we'll see. I don't know. It's not simple.
I think
honestly, the Houthi problem is simpler than this.
And that one's going really well.
It's not going well, yeah.
Oh, I would also like to say, so 3 weeks ago, I said on this very podcast, only here do I ever talk. I said, why do we even bother bombing the Houthis? Trump opposes international trade, so what are we doing here? And some people in our comments pointed out that, I was simplifying the argument, that we still have international interests. We still do international trade. And I would like to say, I don't know. I think I was right in light of the tariffs. But to go back here to Iran, do you think we're playing with fire? That you're right, the Iranians keep saying the more you threaten us, the more likely we are to build a nuclear bomb. And I think they even went out and said, if you bomb us, we will build a nuke. And do you think we're playing with fire in the sense that Iran could build one and use one in retaliation to a U.S. strike? And you got to assume it's going to be a decapitation strike, right? They use a nuclear weapon that lifts a taboo, and now Putin's using nuclear weapons in Ukraine. I know that perhaps maybe a little down the rabbit hole, but it seems like a pretty clear second and third order consequence.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big takeaway here is to maybe not let situations get to this point, which is that speaks to multiple administrations on both sides of the aisle over the course of the last, 20 years on or about. Because now we're in that point where we have different agencies in the United States talking about how long it would take Iran to get to a nuclear weapon. And without doubt, it's less time today than it was a couple years ago, less time today than it was 10 years ago. So we've put ourselves in this situation due to lack of effective policy over the long term.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think there are rumors, I don't want to say rumors, but reports from 2004, 2003, that Iran had sent a message to President Bush, a letter through the UN, basically saying, we will not develop a nuclear weapon in exchange for security guarantees, essentially asking to be part of the American network of alliances. kind of a major walk back from where we were before that and where we are now. Do you think, now some people have said, well, it wasn't clear how serious the letter was. All we know is that the United States didn't reply. Do you think that was a major error, or do you think perhaps the story is being mistold?
Too many details there to kind of pick apart, but I do think, for what it's worth, we tend to paint Iran in this broad brushstroke, say Iran is bad, and that's not the case. They're under a bad regime, I would say, an autocratic regime, or religious theocratic regime. Is that the right way to put it? But there's a lot of Iranians that are very pro-America, pro-West, and they would like much closer relations, and they do not harbor any ill will towards the United States and towards Europe. So Iran's a unique in that case, where there is a degree of support for kind of joining the international community and being kind of a member of the club throughout their population. But at the top, that's not the case. So I don't know. I've not heard of that letter before, but I think it's, that's another aspect here where we always talk about what would some sort of revolution look like in Iran, or would there be some sort of toppling? Could that happen? Enough popular support, and we every couple of years there's something, and we're like, maybe this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it never does. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is an undercurrent of moderate Western support, if you will, inside of Iran.
I fully agree. I hope that the Iranians, I hope for peace between our two nations. Maybe that means Khamenei has to go. I don't know. But every Iranian I've ever met, I've liked. So I think that has something to do with it. And I'll tell you what, every Russian I've met, never liked. Anyways, Greenland.
Yeah.
Greenland. So the United States, New York Times reported yesterday that we are serious about acquiring Greenland, and that we are continuing on with our messaging campaign, and that the White House is weighing paying every Greenlander $10,000 a year. Although that may be, I mean, the way the dollar's going, it might not be worth anything to them, but $10,000 a year to everyone in Greenland to try to convince them to leave Denmark and join the United States. Thoughts? Oh, wait. Before I ask for thoughts, we also saw the commander of the military base, the U.S. military base in Greenland, get fired because, what did she say? She said that she believed that Denmark was a good ally or something like that. Did she directly? Yeah, did she directly rebuke Vance's condemnation of Denmark? I don't think it was direct. I think she just said they were a good ally, but she was fired. And so, thoughts here on this Greenland thing. They really want to acquire it. They're willing to pay. Currently, the New York Times says that Trump does not believe we need to invade. Thank God. But that they
crazy
are
conversation
going forward.
we're having here, huh?
I know. This is crazy. So, thoughts on paying Greenlanders? I'm glad that we have Doge. They can cut everything from the federal government so we can afford to pay a bunch of people who are not part of our country and never will be. So,
I'm kind of interested in that just kind of thought experiment. Like, if you go to a country and say, here's this social contract, we'll pay you to vote to join our country, is that wrong? Where do we fall on that? Like, I feel like I'm mixed.
It's bribery.
Right?
I mean, I'll tell you what, it feels like one of those, like, from during the entire 1800s, we just do bullshit like this around the world, where we would just show up, whether it's a Latin American country or like some Indian territory or my Native American territory. But, we would show up and we just pay people to do what we wanted on top of all the other dirty tricks we have. I just think, I think it's, if I was Denmark, I'd be furious. I'd sever diplomatic ties with the United States.
Sure. Yeah. If I were Denmark, I'd be livid about this. I'm talking about just the concept as a whole, maybe the people of Greenland. I feel like I'm not in terms of like a tactic, I'm not totally opposed to it, I guess. Because you are kind of saying, like, you guys still get to decide. If you decide, here's what would be on the other side of it. That's better than war and taking things, I would imagine. Better than what Putin's doing in Ukraine. Offering a better alternative. But, yeah, if I were Denmark, and we've seen this, Denmark is furious with us right now. I do want to talk about the commander there real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Colonel Susan Myers, she was just relieved for for loss of confidence yesterday, and what happened was she sent an email after Vice President Vance's visit. She sent an email out to the base. We don't have the full text of the email quite yet, but a couple things here. She said, I spent the weekend thinking about Friday's visit, the actions taken, the words spoken, and know how it must have affected each of you. I do not presume to understand current politics. What I do know is that the concerns of the U.S. administration discussed by Vice President Vance are not reflective of Patufic Air Base, Space Base. So, yeah, it's a little bit. Look, this is going to be a gray zone one for a lot of people. You're going to have people arguing, and I'm working on a video right now on this today. There are valid arguments that the commander-in-chief can relieve anybody at any point for lack of confidence. You have to have confidence in the chain of command up and down, full stop. That's how our military functions. Now, people will argue, should this have crossed that level of loss of confidence? Well, that's not your decision or my decision to make. That's the person in the chain of command's decision to make. The other part here is we have to make sure that we maintain these lines of communication where people can effectively criticize plans before their implementation. So we look at the Russian military, and they do the same thing over and over and over again, conducting these small squad-size assaults, and they're not getting that bottom-up refinement to say, hey, maybe we should not conduct a daytime assault across open terrain without air support. We're going to keep getting slaughtered. We need that bottom-up refinement, and this, even though it's a kernel, is technically bottom-up refinement. But we also need to have it happening behind closed doors, and that tends to be where we've drawn the line historically in the United States, is that type of stuff is fine behind closed doors. And when people start getting fired for differing points of view in the planning process, it's a real problem. But when it makes it out into the public, tends to be historically in the United States where we draw the line and people are relieved pretty quickly.
Did she release the letter to the public, or was it she just released it to the base and then it went public?
Welcome to more of the gray area here. Yeah. She sent it to the base.
Uh-huh. All right.
Sent it to
how
the
many
base.
people?
Not very many. Not on the base. Is that what you're going to ask?
Oh, no. I was going to say, I've never served in the military, but, when I was in high school, I worked at Walmart. I was selling guns. And it was even when I was a barista, or I worked other jobs in college, how many times has the manager ever been, your manager said, well, look, I don't know what corporate's doing. I don't know what the store manager's doing, but this is what I know. And so you can trust me. We'll try to get through this together. Is that kind of what this feels like? What this statement is? I don't necessarily. I think that's a rallying point, but I guess I've never been in the military, so I don't know. Is this perhaps that's acceptable in the private sector, but in the public, is that a major taboo?
You can argue it both ways, to be honest. I have done that in formations before. Stood in front and be like, "Hey, listen, I'm not entirely sure what battalion is planned in here. Here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to make it work from our point of view." But the top down is kind of confusing. That happens, and it happens today across the force of people not totally understanding or maybe not being in total agreement that this is the best path forward, but here's what we're going to do to execute our portion of the mission. That is not unusual. There's again this gray area of it's the commander's job then to articulate what your job is to do, not to disagree up the chain, if you will. Mm-hmm. So disagree up the chain, but down to the subordinates, if that makes sense. So she could have these thoughts all she wants with the vice president and in those meetings, but there is a level of decorum expected to not then turn around and go to the troops and say, I disagree with everything they said. You don't see that often in the military.
It's interesting.
But you're going to see valid arguments in both directions on this one today. I'm certain of it.
Yeah. It reminds me of Generation Kill, where, and I'm coming to think about it, I don't know if Iceman, Brad, right? I don't know if he ever complained. Did he complain to the boys, or did he always complain up the chain? I don't know, but I remember them criticizing Captain America, all the commanders, but I'm trying to remember if, maybe you're right, maybe Iceman never did criticize leadership. It was just everyone else below him. I don't know. But that is interesting. Now let me ask you this. Panama, great song by the Scorpions. But, no, is it by the Scorpions? No, it's by Van Halen. Anyways, Yeah, Panama. Trump said yesterday we've deployed so many troops to Panama already. Hegseth was just there saying we're going to take it back. What is going on here? Are we going to take control of the Panama Canal? Do we have troops there, or is Trump talking silly? I saw we made an agreement that our warships can pass through freely, which I believe was already in place, was it not? But I would also like to go on record here. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, Panama is a developing nation, and what are they charging us? $1 million? That's like nothing to us. I don't cutting $1 million so we can transit. Come on, just give them the money. They could use it. But anyways, what's happening here in Panama?
I'd like to exercise my right to come back to this one because I haven't looked into it enough. I know we just signed a memorandum of understanding with Panama. The secretary was down there, gave a couple of press conferences, but it was I've not been able to read it. I've not seen the details of it. My understanding is that it's designed to foster more cooperation between the United States and Panama to counter Chinese influence in and around the canal. But beyond that, I don't know the details of it. And same with troop deployments to the region. I'm not familiar. We do have some people in Panama.
Yeah.
I've not seen anything about an increase in that number at all. But yeah, this is something I'd come back to.
All right. So we have some questions from the viewers.
Let's do it.
How can the United States, given the ICE detentions at the border, the detention of tourists, they're scanning people's phones, going through their digital devices, which my understanding is they've always been able to do, but that it's increased like 500 to 1,000% recently for whatever reason. We saw a French nuclear scientist get denied entry because he had texts that were what they described as hateful towards President Trump. No one really knows what they're looking for in these phones, but they are going through them. And so our viewer, Mac, asked, how can the U.S. hold the World Cup, given everything going on with the tourists? We're detaining them. We're deporting people. We're cutting green cards. I mean, it's just absolute pandemonium. If you are not a U.S. citizen, you are not safe. I mean, what the CBS found that we sent 75% of the people we sent to the El Salvador prison did not have criminal records. And one of them they sent by mistake. The Supreme Court ruled yesterday 9-0 that the United States, that the U.S. government has to facilitate. They have to bring him back. The man they sent to El Salvador who was not supposed to be there, they have to bring him back. This is after the administration was fighting it. And what we're seeing here, my general point here, and I think to their question here before we answer it, is that U.S. arrivals for international have tanked. They've tanked. Travel from Canada has declined by 80%. Flight bookings are down by nearly 90%. People are no longer coming here. I mean, pray for Hawaii, pray for Florida and Nevada, because the people have stopped arriving. People have stopped coming here, and just on like tourism. So how can we host the World Cup given everything that's going on, given the arbitrary detention of people for random, no reasons? What do you think? I'll let you go first here.
That's something I hadn't really thought of. I feel like we're so much living in the moment with a lot of these things that it's hard to. At times, I forget to look out like this. So it's a good question. Normally, we would have people from all around the world coming in, but you got to wonder how much has to change right now for people to feel comfortable doing that. Because if you're traveling somewhere for, let's say, work or business, or you need to do it to make money, you're probably willing to accept some degree of risk that something could happen. Just generally speaking, maybe it's a 1% chance, right? People come to America understanding there's a 1% chance they might get detained and sent back. Maybe they take that risk because they need the economic opportunity. But are you going to take that risk to watch a World Cup game? I'm not. I'm watching it on TV. Like, there needs to be a 0% chance that I'm going to get detained and sent to prison for me to go somewhere to watch a soccer game. And it's not close. So you have to imagine, what does that number translate to? Is it hundreds, thousands of people that decide I'm not going to risk that? I don't know. That's really interesting. We should probably have an idea of it because people would start selling their tickets, I would imagine, beforehand. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it seems like it's going to have a real impact.
Oh, I think it's going to have a huge impact. I mean, it's a good thing that we're, everything's going really well here on the North American continent between Canada, Mexico, and us. So it's a good thing that we're all hosting the World Cup together next year. It won't be awkward at all. But no, I agree. I think you're going to have to figure this out. I think most people thought, okay, it'll be over within a month. They're going to stop. They're going to pull back. But they've just gotten worse. So I don't know what's going to happen. We host the Olympics in 2028 as well. So I don't really know what... people say maybe FIFA needs to pull it. I don't. FIFA's held this thing in Qatar. Come on, they're not. They held it in Russia, in Sochi, and maybe everyone, people who say they need to pull it say, well, they all agreed that they weren't going to detain people arbitrarily. ICE and Customs and the U.S. administration has not guaranteed that, which is fair. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to see. We will see if there is not a change in policy. I think you may see a pullback. But it's important to note that they can still host the games in Canada and Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there are just less U.S. games. But also people point out, is the Trump administration going to let the Cuban team, the North Korean team, the Iranian team, the Russian team, they'll probably let the Russians in, but the Chinese team, how are they gonna arrest the Iranian team and deport them back to Iran? And I've seen people joke, well, we're going to win the World Cup this year because we're going to arrest all the teams and deport them, which is a little morbidly funny, right? But I don't know. I don't know how we can host this. I don't know what ends up happening here. I think we'll have a clear idea come summer, come the fall. The games start when? Summer of next year, right?
I'm not sure.
So, I don't know, but the money's there. FIFA don't care. So, I mean, we could have games in Pyongyang for all they care. Now, the next question is, best case scenario for the U.S. after all this is said and done, after the tariffs and the fallout of allies and the trade wars, what is the best case scenario, Preston?
Best case scenario is we are able to reshore critical manufacturing capabilities, specifically tied to tech and defense, to kind of harden our supply chain in the event of a war. We have our allies that have stepped up their defense spending significantly and are more independently capable of defending their sovereignty and regional sovereignty. And amidst all of that, we are on good terms with our friends still, which is kind of the caveat. So or not the caveat, but the challenging thing here. So I think in a perfect world, that's where we get to. Probably missing a few things, but that's threading the needle.
It's an optimistic view.
Best case.
But I think best case scenario, it's kind of all what Preston said, but I also think it is, if we get out of this in one piece, I think that's the best case scenario. Getting out of it in one piece.
What? You're not even going to come on, there's got to be some good that in a perfect scenario.
In a perfect scenario, everything goes according to plan. I think it's everything you said, right? But I also think a lot of damage has been done. I've been feeling really down, dude, these past couple of weeks. I haven't felt this bad since we almost pulled out of NATO, not pull out of NATO, but since the NATO controversy, the NATO crisis. So I agree everything you said. I also think best case scenario though is we get out of it and American democracy is rejuvenated, the economy is rejuvenated, and people are inspired by the American people, and we do something grand. The next question is, how many minutes a day do you scream into your pillow?
Why don't you lead this one off?
I don't scream into my pillow. I think I lay on the floor and I have an impending sense of doom. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like everything's going to hell, and it is. But I also feel like we're America, dude. We will get out of this. We will get out of this, and we'll come back stronger. And I'm making a video on this. I've spoken to a lot of diplomats recently, and they all have the same thing. You're cooked, right? But where they are split is what happens afterwards. And I've been encouraged by the British and the Australian diplomats, who are the only ones who have optimistic views, but they said, yeah, when this is all over, you're going to come back bigger and stronger, and, America's going to be back. And I hope that's true. They do inspire me in that things. Everyone else, very negative views. But whatever. Who cares? What do you think? How many minutes a day do you scream into your pillow? Are you distraught by what's going on? Or are you just like, you know what? I'm Preston Stewart. I'm gonna keep rocking and rolling, cruising for a bruising, limousine riding, jet flying.
There we go. I channel into sarcasm, for better or for worse. And I've had mixed reactions in some videos where I just go over the top of, this is so ridiculous, we're just going to make fun of it. And I like that. It kind of lightens the mood for me. Some people like it, I think more than not. But then there's the occasional, like, you can't do this because we don't know what's real anymore. So when things get absolutely ridiculous, and we've been there a couple times recently, I try to just funnel it into sarcasm to lighten the mood a little bit. I'm not a big screamer. Into the pillow. But yeah, that's my mode.
That makes sense. Do you find, what is one thing do you think going into this, because we've been very negative, I've been very negative today, what is something you think we should be optimistic about over the next year to lighten the mood, to go out on a happy note?
Yeah, I think anytime you shake something up like this, it makes people appreciate what they had. So I do think we maybe had gotten a little bit complacent with some of our international alliances and just kind of taking them for granted, maybe in both directions. For what one of the arguments in the United States right now is that Europe takes us for granted, and I think maybe as this plays out, we kind of come to terms that I think we at times take those relationships for granted as well. Maybe economic stability, take for granted maybe the path that our economy was on. So my bright side is that it'll be a little bit grounding in a lot of this, that we'll see that, hey, what we had was pretty good, and there might be some moves to get back to some of those areas.
I agree with you. Yeah. I hope Americans realize what this country means to the world. So, and it's most vulnerable. So I think perhaps we're going down a pathway where they will realize that. We'll see. But anyways, folks, this concludes. And does this conclude? Do you have anything else you'd like to discuss?
Does it for me, man. Let's call it.
That does it for you? Yeah, we're going to call it, folks. So remember to like, comment, subscribe. Give us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple. We'll put up a poll. Last week we had a poll. We said, hey, when do you think these tariffs are going to end? The options were by Wednesday. Kind of clock that one. By Wednesday, by the end of the month, before the midterms, and after 2029. And the number one answer was before the midterms, which I guess is technically correct. But 20% of the people did say he taps out by Wednesday. And that 20%, you were correct. Come collect your prize. And although I guess not really correct, because the tariffs are still in place, aren't they? They're just not the reciprocal. Yeah. But they can come. You'll get your prize anyways. So that concludes that. We're going to have a question here. And let's go forth with optimism and cheer for all. Later, all.